Now let's have a look at functions. Now functions are one of the most useful things in Excel, if not the most useful, because they allow you to take a set of calculations and combine it down into one single step. For instance, let's say you want to calculate the average of a list of values. Now you would need to add up all those values and then divide it by the total number of values there are, and then you would have an average. Now there's a function called the average function in Excel that does all that for us. We only need to provide it with the list of values. It automatically calculates the number of values and adds up everything, divides everything by the total number of values, and give us the average just like that. And it's something we can use over and over and over again. Now there are hundreds of functions in Excel, and the majority of this course is devoted to teaching you those functions and showing you how to use the most useful ones. Now a function can be thought of as something like a machine. Let's take a printer for an example. Now a printer has some inputs that we need to provide it with, some paper and some ink and some document that we want to print. And then what it does, it takes all those elements and combines them into something useful, and it spits out a printed piece of paper that we can use. So now that is exactly what a function does. A function takes an input, could be one, two, could be many inputs, and then it processes them, runs a predetermined set of calculations on them, and provide us with one single answer that we can use. So that makes it very, very useful. Now before we take a look at an example, let me first tell you how to write a function in Excel. It is written in the following format. You first start with a name, which is the name of the function, and then an open parentheses, and then we have a list of input values all separated by commas. Well, these we call parameters or arguments in some instances. And then it's all followed by a closing parentheses. So we have a name, open parentheses, a list of values, and then a closing parentheses. Okay, so let's have a look at an example. So over here I have a list of numbers that I want to round to integers. Basically take away the decimal signs and make them whole numbers. So we can do that using the round function in Excel, which rounds it either up or down and to a certain number of digits that we can specify. It's a very nice function to use. Okay, so how do we do this? Always start with an equal sign. Remember, a function is part of a formula, and a formula always starts with an equal sign. So start with an equal sign, and then we can type the name of the function. In this case, the name is round. And as I type, you can see that Excel displays a list of the functions that match the text that I've typed in, the function names. Okay, but I'm happy with round as it is. So I can go ahead and press the open parentheses key on my keyboard. Now look at this. Excel shows two parameters that we can input into this function. So this function can take two inputs. Remember, inputs are separated by commas. So first it wants a number. So I can go ahead and type 3.21, which is the number I want to round, and then comma. And then it wants a number of digits. So this is basically an input that tells Excel which number of digits it should round the first number to. So to round it to an integer, we will just use a 0. I'll explain this better in a later video, but for now, to round it to an integer, we just use a 0. Okay, and then we can insert a closing parentheses and just hit enter, and let's see what happens. Okay, so Excel rounded it down to 3 because this number after the decimal sign, the 2, is smaller than 5, and that's why it rounded it down to 3. Now for the next one, this one will also, if I use the round function, it will also round down to 3, but I want to specifically round this up to the next integer. Okay, so what I'm going to use here is the round up function. So like before, press the equal sign and type in round up, and then press an opening parentheses, and we are again presented with the same two inputs. So now instead of typing the number, I'm just going to use a cell reference and click on this cell right here. And so Excel will automatically insert 3.14 into this formula when it evaluates it. And once again, I'm going to use the 0 to round to an integer, then close it off with the closing parentheses and press enter. And voila, it's rounded up to a 4. Okay, and as a final example, I want to round this number down to the nearest integer downwards. Okay, so if I just use the round function on this, it will round up because the 7 is greater than 5, so it will round to 3. But I want to specifically round it down to a lower integer. So for that, I'm going to use the round down function, as you would have guessed. Right, so let's do this. Type equals round down, open parentheses, and then we can select cell C5 using our mouse and enter a cell reference C5. Press a comma to go to the next input and then use 0 once again. Close it all off with the closing parentheses and press enter. And there we have it. All three numbers have been rounded using functions. Okay, so there are hundreds of functions in Excel. As I've already told you, you can go to this formula tab over here and you'll see a function library. Now here are several categories that show you all the functions that there are in Excel. We have financial, logical, text. There are many of them that you can choose, and I'm going to show you how to use most of them in this course.